Sam was in his early 20s. He looked like a child. And somehow he got on stage with Steve Jobs in order to present his startup at the time, which was Looped. It was a location-based social network. And when he did that, he became famous not for being there, but for wearing a pink and a green polo shirt. He became kind of a meme online. People were kind of making fun of him. And it wasn't like an accident, right? Like he made a concentrated choice to play the media and sort of play the blogosphere in a certain way so that no one would forget him. But I think Sam's special skill is that he's able to conceive of exponential growth. It's very, very hard for most people. And so he can sort of see 10 years ahead the actual full growth potential of things.
Can you introduce yourself to our subscriber?
I'm Kichiheigi, and I'm a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. I recently wrote the book The Optimist, which is a biography of Sam Altman. The full title is The Optimist, Sam Altman, OpenAI, and the Race to Invent the Future. I think The Optimist is how Sam Altman presents himself to the world. I think this is sort of the core of his personal brand, both like personally and as a businessman. Really, OpenAI is the expression of his boundless optimism.
Is there any reason that you name your book as The Optimist?
Well, the founding of OpenAI itself, right, was a wild risk. The field was already being dominated by Google and other companies much bigger and much richer. But because he was able to project this vision of the future where they could reach artificial general intelligence, or AGI, he was then able to attract some of the best talent in the field with really a leap of faith, right? We're all going to come together. We're going to build this thing that some people don't even think is possible. That is the definition of optimism. And especially when you can get people to put billions of dollars behind it, that's really optimism.
Why people should care about Sam Altman, and then what was the most important meaning out of his company that he's currently building?
People should care about Sam Altman because the company that he created, OpenAI, is the leader in AI right now. Their release of ChatGPT basically ushered in the AI revolution. The stock market has been completely dominated by this story ever since. So our whole economy, in some strange way, he's sort of the strange fulcrum point for this whole new way of valuing companies and a new way of thinking how many employees people need. And so his personal vision is extremely important because, as we saw from when the blip happened, the moment when he was fired, he is that company, right? The company, literally the employees were like, we're going to leave if he is not there. So his vision and his fundraising prowess are absolutely central to how fast AI is developed globally, frankly, at this moment. And we're seeing that all around the world, or we're seeing that with all of the infrastructure projects that OpenAI has been leading with the Trump administration and beyond. They are like remaking the surface of the earth rapidly. And OpenAI and Sam's vision is at the forefront of that.
People might think he's former president of Y Combinator, but after you met him, what was the difference? Compared to people's stereotype or prejudice, what was the difference?
I met him for the first time for that profile at the OpenAI headquarters. I remember he gave us a tour of the OpenAI headquarters, which he had really played a big role in designing. And there was this central staircase, in the very middle of the headquarters that almost looked like it was in a temple or something, big, heavy concrete. The idea was that it would make each person, there are about 400 employees at that time at OpenAI, it would make them all pass each other on the stairs and actually see each other. And I remember him standing at the top of that staircase and it was like a temple, and that he was sort of playing the role of the priest in a temple, and that this whole thing was a little bit of a religion. I did absolutely feel that general sense, right? That what was going on was an act of storytelling and meaning making that was well beyond coding technology, right? And this is what Sam is really good at, is storytelling and meaning making.
What was the first time the public acknowledged Sam Altman? During your research, out of his early experience, what was the most important milestone that we should understand today's Altman?
So I think the public really first saw him when he stood on stage in 2008 at Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, the launch of the App Store. And, Sam was in his early 20s. He looked like a child. And somehow he got on stage with Steve Jobs in order to present his startup at the time, which was Looped. It was a location-based social network. And when he did that, he became famous not for being there, but for wearing a pink and a green polo shirt, like nested inside each other with popped collars. He became kind of a meme online. People were kind of making fun of him. He made a choice to wear something ridiculous so that people would remember him. It wasn't like an accident, right? Like he made a concentrated choice to play the media and sort of play the blogosphere in a certain way so that no one would forget him. But I think Sam's special skill is that he's able to conceive of exponential growth, the potential for exponential growth in a way that is very, very hard for most people to wrap their minds around. I think the human brain just can't really map out exponential growth intuitively. And so he can sort of see 10 years ahead, the actual full growth potential of things. I mean, the biggest one is just add a zero. That is the philosophy of Paul Graham, his mentor and the founder of YC. They would always say, oh, you're thinking too small, you must think bigger. And it was really Sam that allowed YC itself to think that way. He's just an incredible fundraiser, and he was able to bring more money. And they went from, a few dozen startups a year to hundreds under him. And he also brought in a kind of hard tech ambition. So instead of just doing pizza delivery apps and, social networks and things like that, they started investing in like nuclear energy, supersonic flight, big, difficult things that are frankly impossible to make any progress on over the course of like a summer internship program, which is what YC is structured to be. But because the YC investor network was by then so powerful, and sort of network of founders who could help each other, a number of those entities have gone on to be viable businesses. And of course, the most famous of those is OpenAI. OpenAI came out of conversations that he and Elon Musk were having. Elon Musk was being very vocal that he was freaked out that Google was making big strides in AI, and that basically Google would control AI for the future of humanity. AI would be this incredibly powerful thing that would live inside a for-profit corporation, which Elon thought was very dangerous. Greg Brockman, a co-founder of Sam's with OpenAI, once said that, Sam's algorithm is figuring out what you need and how to get it to you. And so I really think that Sam used this algorithm with Elon, that he figured out what Elon needed, which was a way to respond to this threat of Google, and he gave it to him. Well, first of all, he emailed Elon and said, let's write a letter together to the government that says, please regulate AI. So that was their first project. As that letter was happening, he said, hey, what if we started a nonprofit lab? The benefits would go to humanity. We would share the tech open source, and it will be a counterweight to Google. And Elon's like, great, let's do it. And then, of course, he agreed to bankroll it. It was really like solving Elon's problem in many ways with how the idea for OpenAI came about. Like the really important change was when they made the for-profit subsidiary of the nonprofit, and Sam became the CEO of that. They began to talk to Microsoft and eventually landed a $1 billion investment from Microsoft, and then, more than tens of billions of dollars of investment from Microsoft. That change, the sort of for-profit change, was a huge change, one that Sam led, and it happened to also coincide with his best skill, which is fundraising, getting Microsoft comfortable, getting Microsoft to invest. So that leadership change was really Sam taking the company in a direction that was much more similar to what he was used to doing at Y Combinator and his past startup life. So the biggest change happened when Sam got fired in late 2023. Before that, he loved to talk about how weird OpenAI was. You have this weird structure. I have this weird incentive thing where I don't even have a stake. We have this capped profit structure. Our investors are so weird that they are willing to have their investment basically wiped out if the board decides. Like, he was very proud of how weird OpenAI was. I think he used it to create this sort of religion and this sense of like mythic destiny that they had. And to sort of separate them from the commercial world of the Googles and the Facebooks that were their competitors for talent. So maybe someone would have a lower salary at OpenAI, but they would be doing something much more meaningful, right? That was before. Then he got fired. Then he came back 5 days later, and he really came back a different person. he became much less interested in being weird. The company tried very hard to turn itself into a normal company. It failed, blocked by a lot of forces, but one of them is Elon Musk and his lawsuit. And they are still sort of beating their head against that wall right now. But what you see is Sam becoming a much more conventional tech CEO. So he goes before Congress this time and says, actually, like, we don't really need regulation. Whereas he had gone, during that first honeymoon period, he went there and said, please regulate us. I mean, to be fair, he did say there's some regulation, but the general tone was like, we don't need a ton of regulation. So I think his weirder parts just got clipped away. I mean, it was a very like traumatic moment, I think, for everyone who was covering this story. Like, it was definitely for him, of course, and definitely for the OpenAI people, but then for like all the journalists that were also covering it, because I had signed a book deal about him. Like, I was writing a biography, and I just remember like looking down at my phone and like, oh, Sam Altman's fired. I was like, oh, okay. It wasn't like there had been rumors about it or anyone had any idea that it was coming, right? It was completely shocking. I think it was very traumatic for him. He was kind of in like a fog for months afterwards, just trying to like wrap his head around like what had even happened. I think it took him a long time to sort of work through it. And even to find anger, like there certainly was anger, and there's still some anger about the forces that made that happen. But I also think there were lessons. Honestly, I think the most memorable thing that I learned about the blip came from Brian Chesky, his good friend, who is the CEO of Airbnb, who was kind of like a advisor to Sam throughout the blip. Brian Chesky like has one-on-one meetings with each of his board members, like quarterly or monthly or something like that. And he constantly talks to them, right? And in a one-on-one way. And I thought, I don't know like how much of that was going on with Sam and his board members, but definitely not that much. And I think he learned a really, really important lesson about board communication through that experience. I do think that in a certain way he is addicted to risk, right? One of his favorite hobbies is racing cars, and he has McLarens, and I think that like is an expression of kind of his mental state and his love of risk. I think his optimism, there are two areas in particular, maybe three. One is with the device with Johnny Ive. It's really hard to see how they are going to create something that is not Alexa and not glasses and not headphones, but somehow is going to create some new interface for dealing with AI in an almost unimaginably difficult sphere, right? Hardware is where dreams go to die. In many cases, right? Even Elon Musk, who was like talked a little bit about doing a phone at some point, like he will try anything, but even Elon Musk is a little bit scared of making a phone. Hardware is really scary for tech companies, and I think that shows his optimism that he's willing to like dive into that pool at all. Nuclear energy is another one, right? He's been an investor in this nuclear fusion startup Helion for a number of years, and he talks about it a little bit less now, but for many, many years, he said that this was the real solution to the AI energy problem, right? Oh, we're just going to like invent nuclear fusion or invent a process that makes nuclear fusion useful and repeatable and cheap, which, if you talk about a moonshot, right? Like that is literally something that scientists have not been able to do for 100 years. So that is a pretty massive expression of optimism. And then the third one is just this infrastructure thing that's underway where they're building data centers all over the place. And that actually shows how he's able to like convince others to share this optimism and invest in it. When you see companies investing in building these massive, massive data centers, right? They are sinking capital expenditure into this with the assumption that there's going to be enough demand in the future, right? That is kind of a leap of faith because people really are still figuring out what this technology is even good for. So it's a pretty major leap of faith that he has played a really large part in getting other people to join him on.
As you finishing this book, I'm curious about what was the learning from this experience?
Yeah. So I think I was first of all, I was really fascinated by how much science fiction played a role in the story. That if you trace the sort of ideas that led to the sort of AI revolution, a lot of them came just directly out of science fiction. Yes, there was a science thread, but then, during the 2000s, basically, AGI was just like a dream, right? It was just like a fantasy. But there would be these kind of conferences, talk about the singularity, and these thinkers that would kind of keep the dream alive. And they are still very influential in the direction this went. And in fact, one part of them is what became the rationalist, effective altruist movement that became not only believed in this dream so much, but believed that it would be an existential threat to humanity. And I just think that the power of storytelling in technology is not always well understood, and that this story is really about that.